All right, we're going to spend a bit of time on tokenization. Tokenization is a hot topic in the credit card world. So here's the problem. When credit cards were first devised, they were clever. And nobody apparently ever realized that it was really unsafe for payments to be based simply on knowledge of a credit card number, or knowledge of a credit card number and an expiration date, or knowledge of a credit card number, an expiration date, and a CVV. When you type your CVV into, many websites require that, right? Because the world of credit card payments is divided into card present and card not present. A card present transaction means that the merchant physically gets to see your card. Okay? So when you go into a store and you want to pay by credit card, you can't say, oh, I forgot it, but I remember the number. They won't accept that. They want you to reach into your wallet and actually physically show them the card. So this is a card present transaction. When I go on to a website and I buy something and I type in my credit card number, that's card not present because the merchant doesn't know whether I have the card or not. And in fact, most of the time I don't. I have a secret file on my computer that has all my credit card numbers in it. So no matter where I am, I can always buy something with the credit cards, even if I don't have my credit card with me. So it's really not present. I don't even have it. I mean, I own it, but I don't have the card with me. Now, there's, of course, greater risk in a card not present transaction because in that transaction, the merchant does not know his buyer. Can't see him. Can't take a surveillance video photo of him. All that he knows is that there's somebody far away on the internet that knows a credit card number, an expiration date, and maybe a CVV. And if that information is stolen, there's no way to tell whether the transaction is fraudulent or not fraudulent. And so the credit card industry for a long time has been trying to get away from the fact that knowing somebody's credit card number enables you to engage in fraudulent transactions. Didn't I tell you that I had these 50 transactions on my American Express card? I didn't mention this? Oh, right before I came to Hong Kong, I get a call from American Express saying, we noticed a large number of suspicious transactions on your card. Oh, what's suspicious about them? Well, some of them are from Tim Hortons, which is a fast food chain in Canada. And yeah, I go to Canada once a year, but I wasn't in Canada at any of those times. I said, well, if it's Tim Hortons, it's definitely not me. He said, well, there are 50 transactions that appear to be fraudulent. Some of them are buying music online, so all kinds of different things, which I don't normally do. So they were flagged by American Express's neural network as possibly fraudulent. So what happens? I'm talking to them. They said, oh, well, we knew they were fraudulent. We haven't charged your card, but your card has been compromised. You need a new card. So now American Express has these wonderful metal cards. Okay, it gives new meaning to platinum, although they're not made of platinum. So it's metal, okay? It doesn't bend. And so normally when you have a compromised credit card, the instructions are get scissors and cut the card up and put it in the garbage can. Well, you can't cut this. So American Express FedExes me a new card along with a FedEx envelope to send back the old card. So they will destroy it. It's got a chip on it and everything. They don't want this falling into bad hands. Anyway, the whole reason that that was necessary is that somebody got my credit card number and expiration date. And you know, every merchant in the world that I spend money with on American Express gets that information. And so it's terrible. It just leads to an immense amount of fraud, which is bad for us and bad for the credit card company. And it increases the cost of credit card transactions. And it's just bad. So they've been trying to get rid of knowing that amount of data being sufficient to enter a transaction into the credit card network. This tokenization is an effort to do that. The idea is that you want to replace the credit card number with an alias. So an alias is another name, right? So an alias is a name that you go by if you don't want people to know your real name. So, for example, John le Carré, writer of spy novels, that's not his real name. That's an alias. So we don't want anybody to ever find out your real name. which is your credit card number. So we're going to replace it with an alias so that the merchant never sees it, and any hackers or eavesdroppers who are eavesdropping on the network or break into the merchant's database, they will never get your real credit card number. And so they will never be able to introduce transactions into the network that look like you. Oh, okay. It's a good idea. The problem is it requires a lot of infrastructure to replace it with an alias, because you're not going to use the same alias for the rest of your life, because then that would be the same thing as having a credit card number. You don't want it so that somebody who knows your alias can introduce a transaction either. So here's how it works. Again, down here is an explanation of what these abbreviations are. So the payment card has a PAN on it, the primary account number. The primary account number is part of this, right? It's after the first two digits is where the PAN begins. You want to replace the PAN with something else so that the eavesdroppers never get the real thing. And this tokenized PAN, the alias, is going to be referred to as the DPAN, the digitized PAN. I hate the abbreviation because all the PAN's digitized anyway. There should be no difference between the PAN and the digitized PAN. But I didn't make up this terminology. They did. So what happens here is you're the card holder. And of course, this can be done from your cell phone. Your cell phone contains your real credit card number. What happens is that you enroll with a token service provider through your bank network. And what happens is you enroll, you authenticate yourself to them, and when you want to engage in a transaction, you make it what happens is a token request is made. So you go to the merchant. You say, I want to engage in a transaction. A token gets sent to the merchant, the acquiring bank, the issuing bank, and then there is a database here which has a mapping between the tokens and the real primary account number. Because ultimately your bank needs to see the real credit card number. But you don't want anybody else to see the real credit card number. So there's this trusted database here that has the association between the token and the DPAN. Okay, the original credit card number and the digitized one. So what happens is a token request is made, and a token is sent to your card that it uses in place of your real credit card number. Now, there are a whole bunch of different protocols for this. The most secure is that you never use the DPAN twice. It becomes a nonce. And so you make a token request in real time, and the token is sent to you. It doesn't go through any intermediate parties. What it says is the cardholder who has this phone number is requesting a token. The token is then sent to your phone by the token creator. None of these guys know it. The token creator sends that to your phone, and your phone sends it to the merchant, which then goes through his bank, goes through the authorization network to your bank. Your bank says, oh, I got this token. I'd like to know, please, what is the real credit card number associated with it? So it sends a request to the token bank, and the token bank will return the real credit card number, but only to your bank. Nobody else in the process ever gets it. And 2 minutes later, if you go into another store and you want to buy something else, if you're using the single-use PANs, you're going to get a totally different token the next time. So even if Eve somehow manages to get this and decrypt it or whatever, because it's all going to go over a secure channel anyway, even if she decrypts it, that number will be useless next time, because as soon as the next token is issued, the token bank destroys the connection between the old token and your account number. That's the concept of tokenization. Now, in general, you don't use single-use tokens that often. I mean, you use them for very highly secure applications. Usually, the token changes only over a certain period of time. And of course, you would change it immediately if you found out that there was any compromise to your credit card. But that's the concept there, is that you take your regular PAN and you replace it with a tokenized PAN from which your PAN cannot be reconstructed. There's no algorithm that goes from one to the other. The only thing is the association is in this bank here. By bank, I mean, it's not a bank. It's a safe. It's a secure database somewhere that just has PAN and token. And it's not even like a hash function. They're random. So what happens is the PAN comes in, you request for a token, they generate a random number, and they send that back. And obviously, from the random number, you could never reconstruct the PAN. The only way would be to look it up in the secure database. All right. So here's tokenization. So the issuing bank, to start out, takes your card information, passes it through a token generator, which is probably a random number generator, and stores your card number and the token value in its vault, a secure database. And then it hands you the token, which your trusted service manager is going to install on your mobile device. So that's your initial token. You never even start out with your credit card number. You start out with an initial token. Now, how do you use the token? You go to a store and you apply, like NFC, you apply your phone to the point of sale reader in the store. And number one is it goes to the acquiring bank. It has the transaction and the token. What does it do? It passes that through the network. It ultimately gets to the issuing bank. But before it gets to the issuing bank, or maybe in the database of the issuing bank, the token is then converted back into your real PAN. So green is the token. Purple is your real credit card number. So your real credit card number goes to the issuing bank. And then the issuing bank sends back an authorization. And the authorization then here is associated with your token, not your real credit card number. And that's what goes back to the merchant's point of sale device for authorization. Now, if somebody somehow manages to acquire your token, and it's not a single-use token, then they might be able to use it again. But then instantly you'll change that, which is easier, much easier than changing your credit card number. You don't have to cut up cards and throw them away or send them back to American Express. The changing of the alias is simply making a new entry in this database here. Just pick a random number and stick it in there instead. So you can kind of instantly change. Anytime you tell the bank there's a problem, I want a new token, they'll give you a new token. It's very easy. Right? Simple. It's a simple process. All right. Now, we'll do it again, but we'll do it again with a different graphic. So here's an application. An application, and by the way, this tokenization works not just with payments. It can work with anything. Anytime that you don't want a piece of information known to certain parties in a transaction, you can tokenize the data. It doesn't have to be credit card number. So this is a very general mechanism for replacing sensitive data with a proxy, an alias, a substitute, which we're calling the token. So you have an application which is generating or acquiring some sensitive data. This is data that can be only exposed to certain parties and not others. So it takes the sensitive data, and the red lines show the transfer of sensitive data that you don't want the eavesdropper to know about. The application goes to a tokenization server and says, I've got this data. Would you please send me back an alias for this data? And so the tokenization server generates a random number. It puts the original data in its database along with the alias. And it sends the alias back to the tokenization server. The tokenization server will send the sensitive data to any application that's authorized to get it. So for example, your issuing bank will get the real credit card number. Anybody else would only get the token. Okay? And then the authorized application will send back information this way. And the application over here only gets and deals with the tokenized data once the original data has been sent. So if it's storing, let's say it's credit card numbers, and it's storing them in a database, it's never storing your real credit card number. It's only storing the tokens. So if a hacker breaks in and dumps this entire database, they don't get anybody's credit card number. That's the idea of it. It's pretty good, but it introduces additional infrastructure and overhead. Now you've got to have token providers, and you've got to have token servers, and all that stuff. And that adds to the cost of processing a credit card transaction, except the belief is that the reduction in fraud will more than compensate for the additional cost of the security. In general, people don't spend more on security than they think they're going to lose through crime. I mean, you could absolutely prevent people from burglarizing your house if you hired 30 guards with machine guns to stand around your house all the time. Then no criminal could ever get in there. Now, what's the annual cost of 30 guards? Much greater than your anticipated loss from a burglary. So you don't do that. Here, they wouldn't do this if the total cost of it were more expensive than the loss due to fraud. All right. So now you've got a token. How do you use it? So step one, here you are at a point of sale terminal. You swipe your card or you apply your cell phone, and the point of sale terminal encrypts the PAN with a public key of the payment processor's tokenization server. Okay? From then on, the only thing that can read it is the tokenization server. So this is a case where you don't already have a token, right? So what happens here is your real credit card number goes, but it's encrypted by this machine. The merchant never even sees it. Whoever gets this, it's already encrypted by the time it goes in here. And since it's encrypted with the public key of the payment processor's tokenization server, nobody in between here can read it because they don't know the private key to decrypt it. So it goes over here to the tokenization server. The tokenization server then takes the PAN and creates a token. And it sends back the token here. And the token can go to the transaction processing system. That is, the PAN can go, because this is an authorized application. This is unauthorized. This is your merchant, for example. You don't want your merchant to see your real PAN. So what comes back is the token, which gets used as part of the transaction. And that's what he's going to send later when his acquiring bank wants to get paid for the transaction. The token will get sent. And how does your issuing bank know that the token corresponds to a real credit card? Because it accesses the token database and says, oh, for this token, give me the real PAN. And then it can check its records to make sure to do a payment. Okay. So in number 5, the token, the PAN data, and possibly an ID of the merchant are stored in the tokenization database because this is a token for one-time use. It's a one-time use token. Every time you do this, a new token gets generated. The PAN is used by the payment processor's transaction system for authorization and charge submission to the issuing bank. It's okay for the issuing bank to get your credit card number. They have to. Otherwise, they can't check your record. But nobody else gets it. Everybody else simply gets the token. And the merchant stores the token in its database, so later on when it requests payment, it uses the correct token to get paid. However, that token can only get used once. The next time you go to a store and you apply your phone to the point of sale terminal, another token request gets made and you get a new token. And so even if Eve or somebody somehow figures out the token, it can't get used more than once. So it's very secure. Really, credit card fraud is a billions of dollars a year problem for the credit card industry. They really want to reduce it. They don't like it because it makes them seem untrustworthy. They're not cheating you, but they've created an insecure system that allows you to get cheated. They don't like that. It reduces people's confidence in credit cards. And so they really want to reduce fraud because it doesn't do them any good. And you want to reduce fraud too because it's a real pain for you. Sometimes you have to get your credit card number changed. And you got to go to every merchant that you've signed up with and tell them, I now have a new credit card. It's a real pain. So if it's good for you and good for the merchant, it's going to happen. Right? Okay. So here's what Apple Pay looks like. Yeah, I think I may have rearranged some slides. Can I see this a second? I did some rearranging of slides after this. Yeah. All right. Okay. Apple Pay. Apple Pay uses tokenization. So the dark arrow is your real account number. The light arrow, light gray, is the token. Now, if you have an iPhone or a Apple Watch, you apply it at the payment terminal. The only thing that goes is the token. We haven't talked yet about how the token gets in there, but only the token is sent. It goes through the merchant's terminal, point of sale, gateway, to the processor, to the acquiring bank, into the credit card network. All of this is only the token. Finally, when it gets to the issuing bank, there's a de-tokenization service that's provided by the credit card network that takes the token, converts it back to the real PAN, and sends that to the issuing bank. And then, of course, from then on, the authorization goes back through the network that way. Simple. Now, point-to-point encryption. I think that's probably a bad name. That's not so bad a name. Okay. So P2PE, point-to-point encryption. So there's a difference between point-to-point encryption and end-to-end encryption. In end-to-end encryption, the sender knows a key, and the recipient knows a key, and nobody in between knows the key. And so theoretically, the message is secure all the way from one end to the other end. Okay? In point-to-point encryption, different keys are used between different pairs of points. So for example, when you swipe your card encrypts the data. I mean, the point-of-sale device encrypts the data and sends it to the point-of-sale system in the back office of the merchant. And eventually it's sent to the payment processor. In this case, it's Bluefin. That's where I got this graphic from. And so this is the same, this is the same, okay, and this is the same. On the other hand, the data is decrypted by Bluefin. The card is tokenized, that is, a token is created, and then it's all re-encrypted. So this is a different message from the message that was sent here. And then the card is processed by the issuing bank. Moving on. So here's a combination of both P2P encryption and tokenization. And this is for a card-not-present transaction. That's what CNP means. And a retail transaction is a card-present transaction. So let's talk about an ordinary transaction. In an ordinary transaction, the card is present. And in the retail system, the transaction goes to what the ERP or the major processing system of the merchant and gets sent to the payment gateway and gets sent to the processor. And the idea here is that if the merchant, this does not go over the internet. This goes directly between you and the merchant. This does not go over the internet. It goes over the card association network, which is believed to be secure. And so you can send, if you use the card, you can send that directly without tokenization. On the other hand, in a card-not-present transaction, this is going over the internet. And if this goes over the internet, it's potentially insecure because Eve might be listening in. So in this case, we're going to do a tokenization. So what happens here is before you send this into the network, there's a communication where there's encryption, point-to-point encryption, and tokenization occurs. And a token is sent back from the token vault, and the token goes through here and up there. So it makes a distinction because the fraud in card-not-present transactions is much higher than in card-present transactions. So some systems choose to use tokenization only for the card-not-present type of transaction. I don't know why. I mean, I think it's just as easy to use it for everything. All right. This is not in your handout. So you can either take pictures of it, or I'll make these available to Sonia so you can get these slides. I had a question the other night about QR codes because they're so popular. And I promised to talk about them in the mobile payments lecture, so we have to talk about them. Okay. So does anybody have anything on them that has, here we go. This has a barcode. See this thing? Very common barcode. It's used, oh, that's a QR code. I was looking for a barcode. I got a QR code up on the screen. So this is an ordinary barcode. Barcode has certain problems. One is that if you're going to scan the barcode with a laser scanner, and you know there's a red line with a laser scanner, you have to orient the laser scanner along the line of the barcode. If you do it this way, it can't read the barcode. So there's some physical manipulation required of the item in order to be able to read the barcode properly. The second thing is the barcode is limited to, I think, 16 digits or something like that. So there's a very small amount of information that you can put in a barcode. And so for years, there was research on how to develop something better. And the better thing is called a QR code. It stands for quick response. You can think of it, if you want to, as a two-dimensional barcode. It's just like a barcode, except it encodes a lot more data. In fact, while the barcode is in a fixed, rigid format, the QR code can expand. They're not all the same size. You can make very, very large ones. And in fact, you can encode over 7,000 digits of information in a QR code. It ends up being pretty big when you do that. But you've seen very big QR codes, like they're on the sides of buildings. You can point your cell phone camera at them. Okay? So they're a variable size, and they can be read in any orientation. There's no work required in order for you to reorient anything, because a QR code reader can read it even if it's turned 45 degrees, so it looks like a diamond instead of a square. Now, how does it do that? The way it does that is with these codes. So the blue area is called the quiet zone. That has to be blank. Why? Because the QR code reader needs to be able to distinguish the QR code from other stuff that might be surrounding it. So there has to be a blank area there. Now, notice there are 3 of these, the position encoding. 3, not 4. If there were 4, there'd be total symmetry, and you would never be able to tell what the orientation was. But because there are only 3, you can always tell what the orientation, the correct orientation of the barcode is. Then there's some version information. Is what version of the QR standard is this encoded in? That's right next to these diagonally opposite position markers. Then there's some format information. The format information tells something about how big the QR code is and what format it's encoded in. Then the amazing thing about QR codes is that they are error correcting. Barcodes are not. If a barcode, for example, if an item in a store is dirty, like the last person who handled it had oil or something on their hand, and it messes up the barcode, it either won't read or will read incorrectly. You might actually transform a valid barcode into an invalid, into a different valid one. This doesn't happen with QR codes. Any single bit error is automatically correctable. Single bit means 1 pixel of it. If 1 pixel is not readable, it doesn't matter. The QR code mechanism can correct that because information is stored redundantly in the QR code. And then there have to be some timing marks in the QR code. So the timing marks are used to determine, it depends on how the thing is read. If the thing is moving when it's read, it can still read it. And the timing marks help it resolve what the still image of the barcode should be, of the QR code should be. But all a QR code is a string. You can encode ASCII in there, you can encode binary, you can encode decimal, but it's just a string. It's not magic. It's just like a barcode, which is just a string of digits. Reading a QR code is just reading a string. The string may be a URL. And so if your barcode reader or your QR code reader reads a URL, it knows to open your browser and point the browser to that URL. And so it takes you to a web page. So if you're at a store, and the store on the window, they have a QR code for more information about us or our products, you just point your camera at it, All it is a URL, and it just takes you to a web page. And so it's the same thing with payment. When a real-time QR code is generated by the merchant, it has information in it about who the merchant is and the amount of the transaction. That is read by an app on your phone, and that is, to that is added your credit card or your payment credentials, and so a payment transaction is sent to the payment provider. That's all it is. There's just no magic to it. Although it kind of looks like magic because it looks like only robots can read that. It's not. But you'd be really bored if I wrote out a URL that had the merchant's name and the amount of the transaction. It wouldn't look so magic. This looks like real magic, but all it is a URL. All right. So I want to talk about WeChat Pay, which I only know a little bit about. And the reason is, one, I don't read Chinese, and two, a lot of these payment systems are pretty close-mouthed about details on how they work. So WeChat is a payment mechanism embedded in Tencent. By contrast, Facebook receives 95% of its revenue from advertising. Tencent only receives 19% of its revenue from advertising and 81% from providing services, including payment services. It's a very, very, very different business model, although they're both social networks. Personal WeChat allows peer-to-peer transactions similar to PayPal. I'm not going to talk about those today because we talk about that on Tuesday. Company WeChat actually allows settlement directly to a bank account. Faster than PayPal. You can also do cross-border payments with WeChat, and what's used is the spot exchange rate of China Construction Bank. Big bank. And big banks always are willing to engage in foreign exchange transactions at a certain rate, and that rate changes all day long, all the time. So whenever you engage in a transaction, they ask China Construction Bank, what is the instantaneous spot rate for currency conversion? And that's the rate that's used on WeChat. It uses RSA digital signatures, and there are 5 different payment modes, one of which is scanning a QR code. So you engage in a transaction, and this QR code pops up on an LCD screen of the merchant, and you point your phone at it, and you think amazing things happen. But all it is a string that contains the merchant's ID and the amount of the transaction. There's nothing special about it at all. Okay, so here are the modes in which it can be used. You can use it on a desktop. So here I have a cell phone, and I'm on my desktop, and I'm at a merchant, and I've ordered some stuff, and it's time to pay. How would you like to pay? I want to pay by WeChat Pay QR code. And so a QR code appears on the screen, and because my desktop and laptop are dumb, they don't have my payment credentials on them, but my smartphone is really smart. It's got the payment credentials. This is a crazy combination of desktop buying and cell phone paying. Right? There's no reason that the credentials couldn't all be on my desktop, except my desktop doesn't have a secure element, and my cell phone does. So you just point the app at this thing. It reads the QR code, and the QR code simply tells it what the amount is and who wants to get paid. That's all. And then there's an exchange of credentials over the air, because you've got a payment provider that's talking to you, and your phone is simply sending a payment order to the payment provider. Please pay this merchant this much money. And the payment provider knows that this is completely authenticated, because this can only have come from the secure element on your phone. Whereas if you did it on the desktop, it wouldn't know that it was completely authenticated. You don't have to use a desktop. You can do everything on the phone. So you go to the merchant, you buy some stuff, it comes time to pay, and you select WeChat Pay, and then, boom, it just happens from there. You don't need a QR code, because all the information about who the merchant is and the amount is already on your phone. In store, okay, what happens is it's time to pay. You tell your phone what the amount is that you want to pay. It produces a barcode and a QR code, and the store, depending on what kind of reader it has, this is clearly a barcode reader. This does not read, this horizontal line, red line, does not read QR codes. The merchant will then point his point of sale reader right at the barcode that's produced on your phone. And of course, that contains exactly the same information. It contains the necessary payment credentials to cause the merchant to get paid. There's a complicated message flow for WeChat that I don't really want to go through. I don't want to go through all 16 steps of it. If any of you are completely fascinated by WeChat Pay, then you can study that after hours and convince yourself that you understand it. It's not worth taking the time of everybody in the room to talk about it. So you may be familiar with diagrams of this type. So they're very common, particularly in payment systems, actually, because what they're showing here, the flow of time is down. These are different parties to the transaction. The arrows show where the communication is going between. So the consumer is interacting with the web browser. Here, the web browser is interacting with the merchant server. That's typical, right? That's the client-server thing over the internet. Here, the merchant server is interacting with the payment provider, which in this case is UnirPay. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but they're a payment provider in China. OK, now, so this is the first thing that happens. That's the second thing that happens. So time is going down here. And this is simply showing between which parties the messages are passing. That's all. Now, be careful. When you see an arrow between here and here, even though it crosses this line, it doesn't involve this guy. Like here, between the consumer and the browser, WeChat is not involved here. This goes directly between the consumer and the browser. So this avoids complicated diagrams in which there are all kinds of crossings of arrows. So if I put all these parties up in a two-dimensional arrangement, and I drew lines for all of the communications, they would crisscross each other because they're not separated in time. This kind of diagram separates them in time, so they never crisscross. That's why these are used. So, supposedly, they clarify the whole process. Google Pay, which I told you the Google Pay app was just released in Hong Kong, or released worldwide last week. And I installed it on my machine. Google does tokenization. So this is Google Pay, available on Android machines. It's exactly the same as we talked about before, except that this uses different logos and different colors. But the phone is provisioned with a token, which means that your merchant never receives your real credit card number. On the other hand, obviously, there has to be a token service provider that translates the token into the real credit card number so that your issuing bank gets it and can provide an authorization response. OK. So this is a slide that talks about mobile and O2O commerce. O2O commerce refers to online to offline or offline to online. This reflects the fact that most merchants have both online stores and physical stores. For a long time, Amazon didn't, but Amazon is now opening physical stores that you can go to. And a lot of people, there are a lot of online merchants, clothing merchants, that are getting killed by online sales. Because what happens is people order clothing in multiple sizes because you can't tell over the internet which size is going to fit you. So the merchant sends you 4 sizes, you pick one, and you return 3 of them. And so the cost to them of processing these returns is huge. And sometimes when something gets returned, it's really not suitable for reuse. And hypothetically, they're allowed to charge you for that, but in practice, they often don't because they don't want to lose you as a customer. And so a lot of people are reverting to buying clothing in physical stores. Then there's other stuff that I pretty much only buy online, like camera equipment. I don't need to go into a store. I can read the spec sheets because it doesn't have to fit my waistline. It's not like clothing. The camera's either going to work or it's not going to work. It doesn't depend on how big I am. So the problem that many merchants had is they were unable to make a connection you as an online customer and you as an in-store customer were two different people. Because when you all shop in stores, yay? Yes? Right? You don't only shop online. So you walk into a store. Do they know who you are? Do they have any way of accessing your internet purchasing record? No. You may be a fantastic customer online, and you've never been in the store before. You would like to be treated as a VIP customer. I know. I buy a lot of camera equipment from B&H Photo in New York. I mean, a fortune. If I walk into their store, they have no idea who I am. They should treat me like a king. They should roll out the red carpet and throw rose petals on it. But they don't. And so there has to be some mechanism to connect the online presence of a customer with the offline presence. For example, when I buy clothes online, and I buy shirts online. That's no problem, because I know my size. They know the type of shirt that I like. They know the kinds of colors I buy. They know whether I want short sleeves or if long sleeve, how long the sleeve length should be. They know all that on the online store. When I walk into the physical store, they say, hello, I'm your salesman, Jim. Who are you? And I introduce myself, and they say, well, what size are you? And I'm thinking, you already know all this. It's in your database. If only you could connect that with me. How can you do that? Well, it's very simple. If you have a cell phone, then the cell phone can identify you. So it can identify you certainly by wireless LAN, Bluetooth, any number of mechanisms. So in fact, before you even enter the store, there can be a communication between your cell phone and the store as to who you are. So when you walk in, they say, Dr. Seamus, welcome. Okay? The shirts are over here, because they know from my sales record the kinds of things that I usually buy. And so it's the cell phone that actually permits the connection between offline and online. Other than that, there's no way. Unless I had like an ID card or something for each store, and they swipe the ID card when I come in. But then I'd have to wear a pouch full of ID cards for all these different stores. Your cell phone is your one ID card for everything. And so it becomes the universal appliance. It not only has your identity, it enables this connection, and of course anything you buy, you can pay for with the same device. So it's like perfect. Okay. Before we do this, I want to do some more. This is the stuff that's on your slide sheets that I took off and put in the WeChat stuff. Okay, so we're going to go through this. How do you enroll in Apple Pay? So this is pretty clever. So normally enrollment processes are a pain. You have to fill out forms. So Hong Kong is the shopping paradise of the world. I buy a lot of stuff when I come here. Every time I go into a store, they present me with a card. They want my name, address, phone number, email address, etc. So they can bombard me with sales offers. And so I fill it out because I want to be nice. But the first time I get email from them, I hit unsubscribe because I have better things to do with my life. So Apple is clever. And what they've done is they've totally streamlined the enrollment process for credit cards. All you have to do to add a credit card to Apple Pay is take a picture of your credit card with your cell phone. And it has image processing software that not only figures out what credit card network brand it is, of course, because they have these big logos, Visa, MasterCard, et cetera, but it's able to read your credit card number and your expiration date. Okay? So you image the card with your cell phone. That card information, the image, is sent to Apple. Apple verifies with the issuer that the credit card is real and good. It's not fake, it's not stolen, etc. Why? They can't tell, because I could go to Photoshop, right? And I could take a picture of a credit card, and I could put any name on there, and I could put any card number on there. And if Apple didn't verify it, then they would be fooled by it. So they have to verify the card information. They verify that with the issuing bank. Once the issuing bank sends back an approval that, in fact, this is a real card, the issuing bank sends back a token. And the tokenized PAN is then sent to Apple's wallet server, which then sends the tokenized PAN to your cell phone. From then on, when you buy something, you're not using your real credit card number, you're using the token. And that's okay, because your issuing bank, in its database, is able to recover your real credit card number from the token. Okay? Now, this account number, this tokenized PAN, is device-specific. It can only be installed on this device and used by this device. So if for some reason it is compromised, and Eve gets it and tries to use it, maybe before you do, if it's a one-use token and she gets it first, she could use it. It won't work because it's not personalized to her device. She would have to have your exact phone in order to do that. So it's really much more secure than ordinary credit cards. So here's proximity payment. So you have, let's say, a Visa card, which you've imaged on your iPhone. And you want to pay with that card. You select it, and you bring your phone near the proximity reader. And of course, what happens is the tokenized PAN is what gets sent to the acquirer, because that's what gets emitted by the phone. So this blue stuff. The tokenized PAN then gets sent in an authorization request to your issuing bank. The issuing bank consults the token safe, looks up the token, gets your real credit card number, and then decides whether to authorize or not. And if it authorizes, it sends the authorization back this way to the merchant. Completely tokenized, completely secure. This one, really, even if somebody else gets the token, they can't use it, because the token has embedded into it information that must match other information that comes from the secure area on your telephone. And Eve can't match those. It's all encrypted. She can't do it. Poor Eve. The day of the eavesdropper is going away. OK, so this is how you would use Apple Pay remotely. So you go to the Disney store, and you want to buy a ringtone, or I don't know, whatever. What do they sell in the Disney store? Probably sell stuffed animals or something. So you want to buy something. So the tokenized PAN is sent to the merchant. The merchant is able to decrypt the payment data to make sure that the amount that you're asking to be paid is correct. Otherwise, you could fool him, right, if it was all encrypted. So he can decrypt the payment data, but he can't, and he, of course, can decrypt your tokenized PAN because you don't care if he knows that. That's sent, again, to the acquirer. It's the same process. It eventually goes to your issuing bank, which detokenizes it, looks up your credit card number, and then passes the authorization back to the merchant. Apple Pay with fingerprint, Touch ID. So Apple phones have fingerprint recognizers. Somehow they tend not to work with my fingers. So I don't have an iPhone. I don't use fingerprint ID. But a lot of people it's very successful for. So the way it works, this is clearly old. It says iPhone 6 SE. Use Apple Pay? Yes. Use Touch ID to authenticate. So this is to prevent when you lose your phone or somebody steals your phone, it makes it impossible for them to use your phone for payment, even though your payment credentials are on the phone. They can't get your payment credentials. Your phone can emit the payment credentials, but nobody can get them, right? You can't, there's nothing you can do to the phone to cause the credit card numbers to appear on the screen. So what prevents Eve from picking up your phone? What prevents it is that she doesn't have your fingerprint. So it's like a PIN. I mean, you got to use your fingerprint to authenticate. Then, only then will the app emit your credit card data and pay it, cause a payment to be made. We don't need to talk about that, or that, or that. OK. No, I mean, it's stuff that I put in there in case I didn't have enough content to fill the lecture. And it's true that we haven't gone a full 3 hours, but we've done so many concepts today. I mean, you've probably half forgotten already about the micropayment scheme. And the key concepts in mobile payment are, 1, it's used for transmission of payment orders. 2, the secure element plays an utterly key role. And the secure element, which you probably didn't even know was there, is provisioned by this other guy you didn't know that was there, called the Trusted Service Manager. And then the third concept is the concept of tokenization. Tokenization is used all over the place, but it's almost universally used now on cell phones. So all of these things, Google Pay, Apple Pay, et cetera, all these guys now are doing tokenization. Okay? I'm going to let you enjoy what little there is left of your weekend. And we'll get back together on Tuesday, talk about PayPal in China, and then you'll have to get your minds ready for Thursday, which is all about cryptocurrencies. And in cryptocurrencies, we're going to have to, again, use everything we learned about cryptography and hash functions is going to come in there.